Dear Songwriter, I'm attending this weekend retreat. It's a virtual retreat, 3 sessions. The first one is about lyric writing. The second is about melody and groove. And the third is about the business of songwriting and the industry of songwriting. Had the first meeting yesterday, had the first workshop yesterday that was about writing lyrics. And so I wanted to record this. This is the day after. I wanted to record this while it was fresh in my mind, and I wanted to tell you 3 takeaways that I had from that workshop. Before I get into that, if you don't know who I am, my name is Connor Frost. I am a musician, I'm a songwriter, and I'm a professional mentor who helps songwriters such as yourselves to write and release their first album so they can effectively start their artist journey. Going strong with this podcast into August now, started in April. Feeling really good about where it's going. Listenership is rising. And once again, if you're tuning in every week, and I know some of you are, some of my clients, some of my friends, some of you who are strangers to me now, following me on Instagram or on TikTok or whatever it might be, thank you for continuing to listen. It really keeps me inspired, keeps me motivated to keep doing this. So, like I said, this workshop was centered around writing lyrics. And obviously, lyrics, melody, and all of that are intertwined. Today, for the sake of keeping it simple, I'm going to keep this about lyrics specifically and the takeaways that I got from the first day of the retreat. So the first takeaway is this question. Are you telling the listener how you're feeling with your lyrics, or are you making them feel a certain way? And I think that's a really important question. I think sometimes, myself included, we treat songwriting almost like each song is kind of like a diary entry, right? And I think there is a difference between just telling someone how you're feeling in your song versus making someone feel a certain way, right? So I think that's an important distinction, something to consider. The second takeaway is that imagery can be used to slow down the story. You don't need to give everything away in the chorus. We were looking at a lot of country music lyrics, actually, and country music is not generally my jam, but I think it was really interesting to look at how country music is written, and a lot of it is based in imagery. By focusing on setting the scene in verse 1 specifically, the story goes at a pace where you're not necessarily giving away all the details, you're not giving away the main point until perhaps the chorus as the first time you give any of those details, right? So imagery can really slow down the story, which could be a good thing, right? And I think there's maybe this insecurity that we have as songwriters in the first verse specifically, where we're like, is this interesting enough if I'm just talking about what I see, smell, hear around me? Is that boring for the listener? And it might be, right? And so creating that balance, continuing to progress the story along, even in the first verse, while keeping it at a slow enough pace so that, again, you're not giving it all away. So I thought that was interesting, that imagery can be used to slow down the story, specifically in the first verse. Takeaway number 3 is to create and switch the vantage point. And there's a couple ways you can do this by splitting up the verses perhaps into different periods of time. So past, present, and future, right? So maybe in the first verse, you're talking about the current state, right? Second verse, you're going into the past, and then maybe the bridge is looking into the future. So that's one thing you can do in terms of switching things up. This is especially helpful if you're feeling stuck on the second verse, which is something I hear a lot of. It's like, I can't figure out the second verse, can't figure out the third verse, right? You can switch that vantage point. The other way you can switch a vantage point is through perspective. First person, second person, third person, right? So maybe in the verses, or at least in the first couple of verses, you're speaking from the I perspective. Maybe in the third verse and or the bridge, you switch it to the second person perspective, right? And then all of a sudden, it becomes about the listener when you do that, right? As opposed to me, right? So that can be an interesting way to shake things up. Also, third person, right? If you're telling a story, perhaps you're writing about yourself, but you're personifying it in the third person narrative. So that was my third takeaway. So once again, really quickly, first takeaway, are you telling your listener how you feel, or are you making them feel a certain way with your lyrics, right? And that's important. That's an important distinction. Takeaway number 2, imagery can be used to slow down the story. Imagery can be used to slow down the story. You don't need to give everything away in the first verse. Takeaway number 3 is to switch different vantage points, whether it's related to time or whether it's related to perspective. Time versus perspective. So those are the 3 takeaways from day 1 of the songwriting retreat that I'm attending in late August. I will probably share more from this weekend in future episodes. But for now, I hope this brought you some value. Once again, my name is Connor Frost, and thank you so much for listening. If you want to connect with me, head to connorfrost.com, CONNOR Frost, FROST.com/juststart, JUSTSTART. We can set up a free call with my team member, David. We'll set some goals, we'll assess your struggles, and see if we're a good fit to work together. Thanks so much. Have a great day.